Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of the Scientology Chat podcast. If you did not know, tonight, March 7th, was the State of the Union address. If I sound a little intoxicated, it's because I was playing a drinking game during the State of the Union address, where if any words were, messed up or intelligible. Is that the right word?
Unintelligible?
That thing. I would take a shot. Unfortunately, there was not too many of those, so fortunately, I was drinking before that. But I am here with the actual host of the podcast.
Tonight is finally the night. We're finally gonna break down the breaking points video. Been talking about it for almost 2 weeks.
Woo!
So I finally was able to cut it. I was able to look up and kind of figure out how much I can share without it being a problem. Assuming that Breaking Points is even gonna give me a copyright strike, but better safe than sorry. Wanted to know the rules before I knew how much I could play at a time before we talk about it.
Well, I wouldn't trust him too much.
Well, just wanted to be safe. So all
Yeah.
the amounts of the clips in here are cut within the time frame that I was able to tell from what I was able to find are all covered under fair use. So, there's quite a bit to cover. I highly encourage you. There are pieces in the middle, and I'll talk about what I cut because I can't show the whole thing to react to the whole thing. But most of the gaps that I cut were just mostly just filler material. Definitely, I encourage you to watch the full video. If you just look up Breaking Point Scientology on YouTube, it's going to be the very first result. So how it's going to pretty much work is I'm going to play you a clip of what he said, and then we're going to talk about whether it's right or whether it's wrong, or the information about what he was saying, if it was correct. Because there are parts that he says that are true. So we'll pretty much just dive right into this one so that we can start unwrapping this. And yeah, we'll just get started with the first thing that they were saying.
What is the core teachings and practices of Scientology?
I'll do my best. The core teachings and practices do actually change as someone goes up the levels in Scientology. There's levels that are non-confidential, and at the higher end, there's levels that are confidential. So the thing about Xenu and the body thetans, most Scientologists don't actually know about that, believe it or not. So the most fair and charitable description that I can give you for what Scientologists believe, all Scientologists believe, even at the lowest level, is they believe that everyone here on earth is an immortal spiritual being. Their word for that is thetan. People say it sounds like Satan with a lisp, but it's just thetan. Scientologists don't believe in a heaven or a hell. They just believe that thetans just continue to exist forever, that this body is just sort of a temporary vessel. When your body dies, you just pick up another body and live lifetime after lifetime after lifetime.
It sounds a lot like a blend between science fiction and religion, a little bit of that coming together.
So the reason that it sounds like a mixture, the reason that he's even saying that is basically to set the stage of what this piece really is. It's not really going to talk about Scientology or anything that it believes. It's not going to dive deep or ask any hard-hitting questions. It's already setting the stage just by saying, oh, it sounds like science fiction mixed with religion, just because they really want you to think that it's all a load of bullshit. Which, if you do, good on you. That's perfectly fine. If you don't believe anything in Scientology, I'm not doing this podcast to try and convert people, just to tell the truth about it. So what he just said is actually true. We've talked about it here on the show before. Scientologists do not believe in a heaven or a hell. They don't believe in a god. They do believe in a form of reincarnation. It's not quite the way that he is explaining, where it's just you find body after body after body after body, quite that simple. Thetans don't immediately become reincarnated when you die. You don't immediately begin the next cycle. But we've talked mostly about that in previous videos or previous episodes where I really wanted to cover that specific bit of info about one of the things that he was saying. So let's keep going.
Scientology has a one-on-one form of counseling therapy. They call it auditing. And Scientologists believe that with enough auditing, you can regain enough of your spiritual awareness and powers to to bypass these between lives implant stations and to regain your ability to have a total recall of your previous lives.
So again, that's not really correct. He says that you have to get rid of your body thetans to be able to have perfect recall of your previous lives. All the way back in Dianetics, L. Ron Hubbard was already starting to talk about being able to recall things all the way back to birth and before. So you don't need to climb the OT chart. It's not hidden behind the so-called paywall. It's not a higher up thing. You don't need to be an OT to have recall exercises done on things in your previous lives to go that far back on the track. That is not correct. You can read that straight from the materials guide chart or from materials that you can purchase in the basic books. What he said is not right. It's not about gaining the ability to have perfect recall of all of your previous lives. Technique 88 is something we previously talked about with Scientology, A History of Man. That is a basic book. It's very early in the materials guide chart. It's not something deep in Scientology. It's something you learn about from the very beginning, and it's not something that you have to believe in order to be a Scientologist. So let's keep going.
Well, hold on 1 second, because the whole because I'm an atheist, although I was baptized Catholic, and my mother, my only parent that's still living, is pretty religious. Apparently, she prays every night before she goes to bed. But the whole past lives and being able to recall all of that is so much of a that's not necessarily something that I can grasp. I mean, it's similar to what's the reincarnation? Is it Buddhism?
A couple of them, but yeah, Buddhism is the main one.
You come up if you're bad, you'll be a blade of grass that gets eaten by a cow or some shit.
Yeah, there's definitely no concept of that or punishment in Scientology reincarnation.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. That's so the goal of and we'll talk about this because he's going to mention it later, but the goal of Dianetics and Scientology auditing isn't really even to get to your past lives. If you follow Technique 88 and you feel like you can find something in your past life and you believe it, that falls under the Scientology doctrine of it's true if it's true for you. They're not going to argue with you or fight against you if you say, I'm contacting an Ingram from a previous life on my track. They'll just try and audit it like normal.
Would and I'm sorry to bring it to this point. I guess you can cut it if you want to, but the whole in the US at least, the whole my truth and all that fucking shit.
Well, it's different when you try to I think I know what you mean, but in Scientology you can't push your truth on somebody. It's more about counseling.
Okay.
If your truth is something that is
that's already better than whatever the fuck's going on here.
If your truth is something that you believe is affecting your mental health, the auditor is just there to try and help you work past it and feel better. You can't use your truth for something on your past track to negatively impact the people around you, but the auditor isn't there to tell you that something that you feel like you're contacting isn't real, so they're not going to try and help you through it. It's one of those things where people can have things that they don't know if it's real or not that has happened to them in their life, or repressed memories or something. If it's something that is negatively affecting your emotion, the auditor's just going to try and audit it like normal, whether it's real or not, this life or the past life. They're not there to make that kind of judgment or aspersion on you. They just are there to audit it like normal. So where it comes to the track, Scientology or Dianetics, I mean, is always trying to focus on improving where you're at on your current track. And so that's the focus of the past lives. He'll talk about that more, and we'll cover it more when he brings it up. But that's a good preface to what we're going to talk about.
Well, shit, yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. Never mind.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one.
Now, what's crazy is that like 90% of Scientologists in the world don't know anything about the Xenu story. They've never heard the word body thetan. They don't know anything about that part of it. They only know about your own reactive mind and trying to get rid of your own reactive mind. So I don't know that that's the 3-minute elevator pitch for Scientology.
Again, that's clearly not true. We've talked about this plenty of times on the show.
What's an elevator pitch?
He's saying that if you only had 3 minutes to try and tell somebody what Scientology is, that would be his elevator pitch.
Okay.
So he's saying that most Scientologists only know about getting rid of your reactive mind. That's just Dianetics. That's not even getting to Scientology. So that's clearly wrong. The idea that Scientologists only know about getting rid of your reactive mind is so stupid, because that's just Dianetics, and that's one book out of 45 different books alone.
Holy shit.
So that is just so incredibly stupid and wrong. That is just Dianetics. That doesn't even get to Scientology at all. The reactive mind, I mean, even if you look it up on Scientology's website, the reactive mind is just Dianetics. That's not even Scientology. So we'll keep going to the next one, because that's pretty straightforward. We have talked about this plenty of times for you to know that that is obviously not true.
I don't know that. That's the 3-minute elevator pitch for Scientology. So I was 4 years old when my mom got involved in Scientology. She was introduced by a friend of hers, which is how most people get into Scientology. Some friend introduces them. So I was 4. Some of my earliest memories in life is just being in the Scientology organization in downtown Philadelphia with, a whole bunch of other Scientology kids in the nursery there. I lived a relatively, my mom joined staff. So instead of being what Scientology would call a public Scientologist, that's someone who pays to do Scientology courses or who pays to receive Scientology auditing, which, by the way, auditing costs between $200 to $500 per hour. It's not cheap.
So we've talked about this before too. The way that he said that is misleading. E-meter auditing is accurate. That is how much e-meter auditing would roughly cost per hour.
The devices are expensive, people.
But that is, most Scientologists don't do e-meter auditing. It's Dianetic auditing, which is much cheaper, even in an org. So I just wanted to stop on that to point out that while what he said is technically correct, he misleads you by saying auditing costs that much when it doesn't. Dianetic auditing is the fundamental auditing that all Scientologists must do. You must do Dianetic auditing if you are a committed Scientologist. It's all about going clear, which everybody knows what going clear is from the documentaries and stuff. But metered auditing is much more expensive, and most Scientologists don't do that. So Dianetic auditing is nowhere near that expensive. You can get 6 hours of Dianetic auditing for like $300. Because like we discussed before, with Dianetic auditing, you pay for chunks of time. You don't pay per session, you pay for chunks of time, and then you use them at your own discretion.
And this comes from somebody that, I mean, you're about the only Scientologist that I've ever known.
Yeah.
And he has so many goddamn L. Ron Hubbard books and CDs. And those are just like audiobooks, basically, or just what?
Those are the lectures where L. Ron Hubbard is giving a lecture to groups of people talking about stuff related to the books. Yeah, like the Dianetic one is him talking about like I said, L. Ron Hubbard's name may be on the book, but in the lectures and in his papers that are available, he gives specific sightings of different people, different groups, different organizations that he worked with. He doesn't take credit for everything. He gives credit freely, even though his name may be on the material.
Okay, basically what I'm saying is I'm roommates with a fucking brainiac over here. Mr. Smart Guy, Mr. Wrinkly Brain, has more wrinkles than most people. Not to take it off of this.
Well, I mean, at least that I certainly take the compliment. So
You're welcome.
I hope by now of over listening to the podcast that I appreciate that people who listen to the podcast and have actually listened to what I'm saying don't think that I'm just regurgitating church talking points or anything like that. Like I've said from the beginning, something is only true if it's true for you. I went into the church knowing everything, all of the worst stories about it. I've questioned everything and only believe what I believe because I've been able to replicate it either on myself or with others by auditing them.
And this person who has a lot of wrinkles in his brain apparently knows more about history than I do, which bothers the fuck out of me. Which, what was it? Episode 1? Where you explain that?
I can't remember if it was episode 1 or not, but I do remember to the conversation.
It's like, oh god, I'm so smart it fucking pisses some people off. Yeah, me!
Oh, yes. Yep. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next one.
Sorry.
You cannot have children in the Sea Org.
Now, I wanted to stop it right there because he just said you cannot have children in the Sea Org, but then listen to literally the next thing that he says.
Wait, hold on. What's the Sea Org?
The Sea Org is basically like if you became a Catholic monk or something like that. The Sea Org is the actual, like, it's a religious order. You join it if you want to serve Scientology for the rest of your life and beyond.
Ew.
So that would be what the Sea Org is. It's like the same thing as becoming a priest or joining a religious order or something like that.
Ew.
So listen to the next thing he says after he just said, you cannot have children in the Sea Org.
After a certain number of years, we were just a little fed up with kind of how unfulfilling and abusive the experience of working in the Sea Org was. So we got pregnant, knowing well that we would have to leave the Sea Organization. So we left the Sea Org because we were having a baby, but we were still public Scientologists.
Okay, so it's abusive because you can't have children in the Sea Org, but you decided to have a kid and then willingly left the Sea Org and were not kicked out of the church. You chose to leave the Sea Org because you wanted a child. They let you have a child. You got to leave the Sea Org and you continued to be a normal Scientologist. How the hell does that make sense to people that what he's saying is true? If you couldn't have children because you were in the Sea Org, then you wouldn't have been allowed to continue being a Scientologist when you left the Sea Org because you wanted a child. That makes no sense. So we'll go on to the next one. Also keep in mind that he just said that they found it was abusive, quote unquote. We'll go on from here.
That started to change in 2009 when the Tampa Bay Times, back then it was the St. Pete Times, published a series of interviews with very high-ranking former Sea Org executives, people who had been famous personalities in Scientology. These people had not only left the Sea Organization, but had left Scientology altogether and were speaking out for the first time. So these former executives who were starting to speak out were telling the most horrific stories of abuse, of imprisonment, of quite literal torture, not quite Guantanamo level, but close. And for me, that was like the first major crack in the dam.
So you spent all this time in the Sea Org and never actually saw any of this, but you started to see people talk about it on a public platform. And even though you yourself were a member of the Sea Org, you only started to hear about any of this, never seeing it yourself. the crack in the dam only came once you started to hear other people's stories, even though you were in the Sea Org for all this time and never saw it yourself. That doesn't make any sense to me. I know many members of the Sea Org, and I'm struggling to comprehend how you could be in it, be moved from all these different places, including Flag, the headquarters in Clearwater, for you to be talking about it coming from the St. Petersburg Times. That doesn't make any sense to me. So we'll continue on to the next one.
Well, I just wanted to add, Clearwater makes me think of Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah.
Not to bring it to video games.
Yeah, you can watch listen to our last one to hear us talk about video games.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we'll go on to the next one.
Of going, a lot of things I have believed were true my entire life are clearly not true. I don't know exactly where everything stands, but something's not right. For about the next 3 or 4 years, I was on a pretty gradual path of discovery of what exactly the lies were. And it quickly became clear to me that it was pretty much all lies.
So on this one, I honestly don't know what he is talking about with lies. He would have had, as a Sea Org member, access to completely free tech. All of the Scientology materials, all of the courses, all of the lectures. He would have, as a Sea Org member, had access to everything.
Even the e-meters?
Plenty. He would have been trained as a metered auditor, as a member of the Sea Org.
Multiple e-meters.
So, I mean...
Once, imagine the possibilities.
I don't know what lies he's talking about. If it's learning about the lies of the religion and what the materials say, because if that's the case, you shouldn't have been attesting as you moved up the bridge anyway. You're only supposed to attest, even as a member of the Sea Org, if you have experienced something, and again, you would attest because you found it to be true yourself. If you were lying, that's not Scientology's fault. You weren't forced to continue to believe anything. I mean, they would have encouraged you because you signed up for the Sea Org, but I don't know what lies you're talking about at this point. You would have had access to absolutely every single piece of Scientology material and all of the courses. So if you mean lies as far as abuse, again, as a Sea Org member for all that time, you wouldn't need to hear it from other people. You would have seen it for yourself. So we'll go on from there and we'll head to the next one.
Well, I was going to say, I don't remember when I was told this, but like whatever you say, what you say is really, God, what am I? It's not what you say, it's what the people perceive is what matters. And so it's up to the individual person to actually perceive it in the right way, and if they perceive it in the wrong way, apparently it's your fault.
Yeah.
Because they're too dumb not to, be too explicit. I think dumb is probably the softest term I could use.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment. And then, okay, so we'll head to the next clip.
Well, there's levels even above the confidential levels. They're so secret, they're so confidential, they've never been released yet. They're still in the vault. It's like the magic, right? And it's sort of the carrot that gets dangled in front of the faces of Scientologists is, guys, we need to work a little bit harder. We need to donate a little bit more money because L. Ron Hubbard said these unreleased levels can't be released until Scientology reaches certain expansion benchmarks.
So that again doesn't make any sense. For one, you can listen to all these previous episodes. I am not normally one for a whataboutism, but what he just said about the carrot being dangled in front of people's faces about more material being released, somebody tell me how that is in any way different from the promised second coming, Whether it's the second coming in Christianity, the second coming in Islam, or the coming of the Messiah in general in Judaism. I mean,
Well, I mean that the U.S. government.
yeah,
There's that.
yeah, I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me. The stated goal of every Scientologist isn't about the miraculous next levels of the bridge. The goal of Scientology is a clear planet and a clear world, and we already have the tools to get somebody to be clear. So the idea that these Scientologists are just waiting with a bated breath for these supposed unreleased materials, that doesn't even make any sense to me. The No Scientologist that I know is doing what they're doing and taking their courses because they're waiting for the next step to be revealed on the bridge. So, if they are, that that may be well and good for them, but to suggest that that is all Scientologists by any stretch of the imagination makes no sense whatsoever. So, yeah. The goal of Scientology is a better planet and a clear planet, and clear isn't even the halfway point on the bridge to total freedom. So we'll go on to the next one.
Well, once I found out from people who I knew would actually know that there ain't no such thing as these upper confidential levels. L. Ron Hubbard did not leave behind anything. They looked everywhere. They looked through all of his papers and his files and his records and his cabinets, and there ain't nothing.
So if they looked through all of L. Ron Hubbard's materials and couldn't find anything, that doesn't sound like it was something that L. Ron Hubbard says, now does it? It sounds like it would have been these people trying to find more material because they wanted to find more material, not because L. Ron Hubbard said it existed.
I was going to say it's either that or they were just too lazy and just put out a puff piece for whatever the fuck they were pushing.
Yeah, I mean, that argument doesn't even make sense. L. Ron Hubbard said that all these materials were going to be released, but these Scientologists went looking for it everywhere and couldn't find it. L. Ron Hubbard wrote so much and wanted it to be read. I mean, judging by the sheer volume on the materials guide chart, that doesn't even make sense if L. Ron Hubbard said to find this material and release it at such and such a time.
And there is a lot of stuff on the material guides chart because it is on the wall right in front of the computer we are recording this on.
Yeah, so, I mean,
I'm a witness.
There are so few OT8s to begin with that idea that it's dangled in front of Scientologists to keep them in the church makes no sense. If you're only in Scientology for you to go up your own bridge, you're not a very good Scientologist to begin with.
Well, then you can get the chart for free, right?
Right, and so there's supposed to be all these levels to add to the end of the bridge. But the goal, like I said, is clear. That's the goal. So we'll go on to the next one from here.
I was like, someone should have told me that 25 years ago. I'm ready to get on with my life.
If you spent 25 years in the Sea Org, like I said, with access to all the materials moving up the bridge, you started all the way down at the bottom and had to attest to the state of clear. As a member of the Sea Org, when you joined, it was to spread Scientology and work towards a clear planet. It was not to try and get the upper levels of the bridge. That's a byproduct of what the Sea Org exists for. Your primary goal is to try and help other people attest to the state of clear. That's it. If you supposedly wasted 25 years of your life in the Sea Org and feel like that was all wasted because there's no more material, when you were never OT8 in the first place, that makes no sense. So we'll go on to the next one.
Before I do want to get into the controversy a little bit that you're alluding to, this control type of thing, but I did want to ask you, what do people just in the world, what do we get wrong about Scientology? Because I'm certain there has to be some positive aspects to Scientology or else no one would join.
Let me answer two different ways. I think one thing that people would get wrong about Scientology is just not truly understanding that most Scientologists have never heard most Scientologists do not know anything about the Xenu story or the body Thetan story.
How would they not?
Exactly. So that is, again, we've talked about this on the podcast. Scientologists know about the Wall of Fire story. They, not only is it not a secret, but at the end of the year, the New Year celebration, David Miscavige actually specifically talks about the Wall of Fire story, not just to the people in the room, but to all of the Scientologists all around the world who are watching it.
Not to drop names.
Well, I mean, this makes so little sense that it's crazy to me.
We do have people looking for us.
Well, I don't at least so far it hasn't been anything specifically negative. But
well, that's the way they do it.
Yeah. But
they lure you in.
Yeah. So yeah, the idea that most Scientologists have never heard of that story is complete bullshit.
Well, I mean, even being a non-Scientologist, I've heard of that. I mean, not specifically because of South Park, but
right,
a big part to do with South Park.
I mean, and he even says that if you've seen the episode of South Park, then you know more than most Scientologists do. And that is so stupid and so wrong. I don't even know where to begin with that, so we're just going to leave it at the fact that it is wrong. Like I said before, most Scientologists, especially young Scientologists around my generation, have seen that episode, including all the former Scientologists who said that they watched the episode while they were still in the damn church. So obviously they know about it, and they knew about it beforehand. We talked about Technique 88. We talked about A History of Man. We talked about how it says about the Wall of Fire story on the Giant Ass Materials Guide chart in the orgs. So that is categorically wrong. That is a lie.
There's also more than 8 billion people at this point, so even a fraction of that could be 1 million people that believe that, and even 1 million people can be wrong. Do your own research, people.
Right. I mean, you don't have to look that hard. You can just listen to our podcast where I talked about specific materials. But wait, he's about to contradict what he just said in this next clip.
Scientologists know everything that I explained early on about the Between Lives implant stations and the prison planet and, the Galactic Federation and all sorts of stuff. They've just never heard the Xenu story.
That doesn't make any fucking sense. Everything he just said that all Scientologists know is from that fucking story. He says that all Scientologists know about the implant stations, the Between Lives on the track, they know about the prison planet. How would they know about all of that when all of that comes from the OT3 materials?
Well, that, and I don't know what the OT3 materials are.
That's that story.
Oh, okay. I'm not a Scientologist, by the way. I do not practice Scientology. I've never been a Scientologist. But I knew that.
I mean, just think about what he said. He said that Scientologists don't know that story, but all Scientologists know every damn part of the story. If you watch the South Park episode and the story, what they're talking about in that episode is what he just said all Scientologists know.
Right.
How the hell does that make any fucking sense?
That's what I was trying to get to.
So, okay, I wanted to point that out because, come on, that perfectly sums up so much of what people say about Scientology in these interviews from former members where they directly contradict themselves right after they say something.
Well, and it's not like Breaking Points isn't access journalism.
Yeah.
They do still have Rokana on.
Right. So let's move on to the next one, but keep what you just heard in your mind. I mean, that perfectly encapsulates so much about why this podcast exists. Because if you listen to that and you just are predisposed to not wanting to believe or wanting to understand Scientology, you might listen to that and graze right past it. But what he just said, I mean, that proves what I've been saying in this podcast from the beginning. So we're going to move on to the next one, but just keep that in your mind.
Yes, keep that in mind because I probably will not.
At the lowest introductory levels, Scientology is actually very practical, sort of helpful in like a self-helpy, personal coach, guru, motivation, Tony Robbins-ish, Grant Cardone, who just happens to be a Scientologist. You can fix all your problems. Just hustle a little harder. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. People who end up joining Scientology, they don't think they're joining a cult. And at the very lowest levels, Scientology doesn't feel like a cult. It feels self-empowering. It's giving you a positive message. You can overcome any obstacle. You can solve any problem. You are all powerful natively. All you need is the right tools. And for $9.99, and we can give you those tools.
So, at the introductory level, Scientology is a religion. It tells you what to do to try and make yourself better. It gives you tools to actually try and improve yourself. It encourages you when you're at the lowest points of your life to try and pull yourself up and make your life better. That's what I'm hearing here.
Well, what came into my mind was the hustle part, which made me think of DoorDash and Lyft and all that shit, which makes the people use their own property that gets worn out and causes, regular wear and tear damage on your car to, no matter what you're making doing those, and I do not disparage those people who do those jobs, but the wear and tear that you put on your car and the mechanical replacements and maintenance that you have to put on your car, you are losing money working for Lyft or DoorDash or whatever the fuck gig work that you are doing.
Yeah, that is good, especially good commentary about our current society and economic climate. When I hear him say that, what it makes me think of is the false promises of other religions that tell you if you're at the lowest point of your life or you're really struggling, all you have to do is pray and put your problems into somebody else's hand for divine intervention.
Oh my god, that's Jesus Christ. That's like Cox fucking following Texas, telling people to pray for rain.
Yeah.
That'll help.
So, if you come, that's what it makes me think of is, he's telling you basically the truth about the introductory levels of Scientology. I hate to be the bearer of bad news for people out there in the world, but if your life is in a bad place and you are putting the fate of trying to get to a better place into the hands of an almighty power, Scientology is not the religion for you. They give you tools because the fact of the matter is if you're in a shitty place in your life, even though the world, the United States for damn sure, the world, society, and the place you find yourself in is not fair. But at the end of the day, putting your fate to try and have a better life into somebody's hands and waiting for a miracle, you're going to be waiting for a long time. Scientology does tell you to try and use these tools in the hope that it will help you pull yourself up by the bootstraps and with the circumstances that you find yourself in to try and make a better life for yourself. And if that's self-helpy or something like that, that's what religion is supposed to be. It's supposed to empower you to try and help yourself to have a better life.
Well, that not go to military funerals and hold up signs that say God hates and shit like that.
Right.
But my other point, I also wanted to not to bring it to a bad point, but to lift it up from that. God, okay, I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. We'll move on to the next clip, but again, every former Scientologist says what he just said. That at the fundamental levels of Scientology, which, like he also said, is the vast majority of Scientologists, the church is helping them. It, quote unquote, doesn't feel like a cult because it's not one. It's giving you what religion is supposed to give you. And so we'll move on to the next one.
Well, that and sorry, going and seeing a therapist, I mean, would work wonders for probably anybody.
I would say to avoid the mental health industry if you can, but if you don't want to be a Scientologist, then I bet some mental help is better than nothing.
Well, I mean,
but the premise I agree with.
I mean, a lot of people aren't really exposed to Scientology.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Sorry.
And then, okay, so we'll go on to the next one. And that's not to say that I hate all mental health professionals. I just want to clarify. I just think, like the church teaches, I think that it's a perfectly valid argument to say that the mental health and pharmaceutical industries force feed a lot of people a bunch of pills because they don't want to actually treat them. The best way to deal with someone who's sad or who's feeling bad is to try and make them feel nothing, which Scientology fundamentally disagrees with.
Well, okay. That makes me want to go into a whole rant of SSRIs.
Well, we're going to do a whole episode about the mental health industry and pharmaceutical industry, so we'll save that. But
okay,
we'll go on to the next clip here.
What on the flip side of that, what is so if there's all these good things about Scientology, it's practical, it gives you these kind of self-help tools.
I mean, he pretty much just summed up what I just said as a counterpoint, even if he was unintentionally doing it. He pointed out what I just pointed out, that the fundamental levels of Scientology provide you with a lot of good things in your life.
Well, I don't believe that Danny Haifong is a, not to name names, but I don't believe he's a Scientologist.
He's not. He makes that clear at the end of the episode, but I think he unintentionally just made a good, valid point. So we'll go on from there, but I wanted to point that out before he poses his next question.
What's the worst part? Why do people, like, why are you said you were driven to leave because of certain things that you saw? Is it the...
No, he didn't. He did not say that he was driven to leave because of things he saw. He said he was driven to leave because of things he heard about after he left the Sea Org and continued to be a practicing member of Scientology. He did not see anything. He said he heard about it through reading things like the Tampa Bay Times. He did not see anything. He's going off of what he heard from other people, which is, I would personally say, is a very bad thing to base your things, what you say, off of. Third-party knowledge is not good enough for me.
Well, I was going to say, what is that called in court? Like, what evidence is that classified as?
I think that's just hearsay.
Yes, hearsay. That's what I was thinking of.
Okay, so we'll move on from there, but I wanted to point that fallacy out. He did not leave because he saw anything. So we'll go on to the next one.
Is it the secrecy? Is it the control they exert over people's lives, seemingly? Is it the leadership? Is it David Miscavige, corruption? What's your opinion on where does Scientology go wrong?
In my personal opinion, the easiest answer to the question is where it just overtly goes out of its way to destroy families, the family unit. Because Scientology has this belief, like we're all just basically 60-some trillion-year-old beings. They have this belief, like, if you have a child, that's not really your child. It's just your body gave birth to that body. But you're a Thetan, and that body's animated by a Thetan. And Thetans don't give birth to Thetans. Thetans are just all natively godlike entities. So this belief completely minimizes the value of familial relationships.
So we talked about this in a previous episode because I wanted to point out that this is another just straight up lie. You can tell, I mean, just from what you have heard in this interview, the Sea Org let you leave to have a child and continue practicing. There are nurseries in the orgs of Scientology. And like I said in the previous one, the second dynamic in both Dianetics and Scientology is a major, major part of the religion, and it's the family dynamic. it just because, I mean, he is right in saying that thetans don't give birth to thetans, and your child has a thetan attached to it when it comes out as part of the Scientology teaching of what a spirit is. But that the idea that Scientology diminishes the family unit is crazy. Every life you live on your track is important. All of the things that happen to you and the people around you are important in Scientology. Being a good parent and raising your child right in Scientology is important. That makes no sense. The second dynamic is one of four and one of eight that thrust us towards survival and beyond survival to thrive in life. That's the major thing that Scientology is trying to help people do.
Well, is that does that have anything to do with evolution and like the basic? I mean, if you're not religious, the basic instinct of creatures, human or animal, whatever. I mean, I know human and animal are in the same class of like fauna and flora, I should say. But it isn't the goal of life, I mean, as I understand it, to breed and survive and pass your genes on, all that stuff?
Yeah, so that's a whole chapter in Dianetics is life and survival. And one of the things that Dianetics was trying to understand was on a fundamental level why life of all kinds tries to survive. And one of the reasons was that's why the second dynamic is the sex and family dynamic, because for some people that is a major drive for them to survive, whether it's providing for their kids or having kids or passing on their genes or whatever. That is, just like you were saying, not even on a spiritual level, because Dianetics does not delve into spiritualism whatsoever. It's just talking about why does life survive. And like you were saying, that's one of the reasons life survives. And specifically with humans, because obviously for a lot of animals and plant life, spreading your spores and spreading your seed and continuing your species, unless you're a panda, is an important aspect of why you try to live.
Well, that, and if you're, not a rich person that doesn't have to worry about bills or taking care of your child in an adequate way.
Right. And so, I mean, that kind of goes back to what we were saying is trying to lift you up so that you can survive across all the dynamics and not just survive, but thrive. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out. We talked about it previously, but the idea that Scientology as a religion diminishes the family unit is so fundamentally wrong that it talks about the second dynamic in virtually every Scientology book, that the second dynamic is an important aspect for you to survive. So we'll move on to the next one.
And Scientology will demand that people sever all ties with anyone in their life who is negative about Scientology. And it doesn't matter if that's your mom, dad, spouse, brother, sister, son, or daughter. To me, that is where Scientology gets really, really bad.
So we've talked about this as well. Scientology is not going to ask you to disconnect from somebody because they said something bad about the church. That doesn't happen. Unless somebody is going out of their way to actually harm the church and harm your ability to move up the bridge in a significant way, that just doesn't happen. Disconnection has very specific parameters that have to be met, and you can read those parameters in the Guide to Scientology Ethics, which you can buy on Amazon or from the church. That's just factual. Disconnection does exist, but it's no different than what exists in other religions. And that has nothing to do with trying to separate you from your family members because they don't think it's important. That's them trying to separate you from somebody who is pulling you down the tone scale because, as we discussed before, you are a product of the people that you surround yourself with, whether they lift you up or bring you down. So that is the basis of disconnection.
Well, talking about tone scale, when he was talking about something to me.
Right. Yeah. All right. We'll move on to the next one.
Now there's financial aspects as well. So because Scientology holds that, this entire existence is really just the matrix anyway. And, higher education is pointless. Retirement accounts are pointless. Savings accounts are pointless. The only thing that could possibly have any value in this lifetime is helping Scientology expand and get more people into Scientology and up Scientology's bridge to total freedom. That whole construct leads to just financial decimation of Scientologists.
That's just bullshit. I mean, that's just straight up bullshit. You can read about that in Scientology in the Workaday World. He goes into that with working and why it's important to help you survive and thrive, not to support the church. But again, I'm going to try my damnedest to avoid whataboutisms because I don't think they prove any points. But if somebody can tell me how the idea that your life in this cycle makes your financial gains, savings account, retirement accounts, etc., don't matter. Somebody tell me how that's different from the concept of how this life is irrelevant and all that matters is going to heaven or hell. Scientology telling you, which it doesn't, to give all your money to the church because there's no point in having it. Then why did Jesus say that it was easier to fit a camel through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven? Well, somebody tell me the difference between those two damn things.
I don't remember. Sorry.
Okay, we'll go on to the next one.
Scientology. Now, when I mentioned before that the experience working in the Sea Org just got to the point where it was not fulfilling and it was abusive, L. Ron Hubbard created this management system where he says there is no natural, explainable reason why stats would ever go down. In order for stats to go down, somebody has to actively be forcing them down and sabotaging the organization to make them go down. Well, unfortunately for Scientology staff members, Scientology is shrinking, not growing. So there's this constant witch hunt happening internally in the organization to find out who is it that's sabotaging the organization. Now, the problem is you can never point the finger up. You can only ever point the finger down.
So again, that's not true. You can read about that inside, like I said, the Workaday Scientology in the Workaday World, where he specifically tells people to point the finger up if your job is unfulfilling or bad. But where he talks about stats only having going down if they're being pushed down or being sabotaged from somewhere, that is obviously actually happening. Scientologists aren't doing a witch hunt to try and figure out why people are adverse to the church. He is the example of an outside person pushing the statistics down.
Well, and I would say people across America, of course, are thinking that their jobs aren't, very fulfilling or aren't going in the positive direction.
Right. And also, joining staff is not the same thing as joining the Sea Org. You don't sign the contract or anything like that. Joining staff is just like a job. You can leave at any point. So that makes no sense. You would only, if it was really that bad, staff members would only stay if they thought that they were getting something valuable in return for that. For one, I do not think that that is actually happening in staff because I spent so much time in an org and I've spoken to and am friends with many Scientologists over the years. But for two, if they really were in that kind of circumstance, they could just leave with no repercussions whatsoever. So we'll keep going and we'll move on to the next one.
So it's the lower level staff members that are constantly just being harassed and interrogated and punished for the fact that more new people aren't coming into Scientology. When the reality is the people at the lower levels of the organization have absolutely no control over the reason why Scientology is shrinking. They have absolutely no control over it. And so the experience of working for Scientology, everyone is just always pointing fingers at each other and witch hunts all the time. And it's just exhausting.
No, they aren't. Scientologists know the reason that Scientology is shrinking, if it even is. Like I said before, there were way more than I was expecting when I was at the org, but there would be no reason to point the fingers at each other. They talk about it in the New Year's celebration. Everybody knows why Scientology is struggling in that way. And like I said, you are the perfect example, and you're about to prove that point in just a minute.
at each other and witch hunts all the time, and it's just exhausting.
Yeah, I want to pivot to talking a little bit about the work that I think this ties in, the work that you do today. So you live stream almost every day. I think every day or almost every day. You have conversations with other people about Scientology. So I'm wondering, what is your goal? Is it to get people out of Scientology? Is it bringing attention? Is it pressuring the government or the IRS to remove its tax-exempt status? What's your motivation?
It's definitely all of those things. Sometimes on my channel, I will say, fundamentally, I'm simply motivated by pure revenge.
Exactly.
Well, that that goes back to the revenge and how like much depravity you have to be into your brain to act upon revenge.
Yeah, I mean, L. Ron Hubbard had this crazy idea that statistics only go down when people are forcing them down. I can't imagine why somebody who was out for revenge might be trying to force those statistics down. What a crazy concept.
And if I can do as much good in the process, but success is the best revenge. And so I define success as making sure that former Scientologists who have their own stories that highlight how abusive and destructive Scientology's policies and practices are, that all of those voices can get as big of a reach, as far as a reach, and be heard as loudly as possible. And I almost relish the fact that we're all doing it with just phones and computers and no budget, whereas Scientology spends hundreds of millions of dollars on the most expensive professional, AV operation possible. And yet the voices of former Scientologists who are telling the actual truth about Scientology are being heard louder with no budget than everything Scientology can muster.
No, they don't. That's just not true. They're given platforms to talk, and like you said, you want to amplify their voice to be heard, seen, and listened to by as many people as possible. And if that isn't a recipe to try and get people to embellish as much as they can to have that reach, everybody knows that sensational media is what sells. There is plenty of incentive for former Scientologists like somebody to talk about hearsay, to exaggerate what they know or what they've seen, or just to straight up make things up because there's nobody who can get that same platform to respond.
I was gonna say that sounds a lot like Twitter.
I mean, that's the whole point, right? They say that the best way to make somebody to make somebody unbelievable is to make them sound crazy, then everything they say just affirms their craziness. That's exactly what you're doing, and you're pretty much describing the process. You're trying to delegitimize the responses of actual Scientologists and the church by amplifying these voices and giving them an incentive to make things up or to embellish.
Well, that, and I was gonna say, I don't know if this was gonna go with what you were saying or not, but the best way to have people believe you is blame the other side of exactly what you are doing.
Especially if nobody knows or isn't exposed to who you're accusing. So Scientology is the great unknown for a lot of people, and so they want the sensational story. That's what amplifies the voice, and in my opinion, sells all their books. If you look up Scientology on Amazon and look at how many former Scientologists are trying to sell a book, I mean, sell a book, sell a TV show, get on TV, sell their story. I can't say with any degree of certainty that they're making everything up, but there sure as shit is a lot of dollar signs that show that there is an incentive to try and get as many people to listen to you or buy your shit as possible. And that's not just Scientology, that's across everything. But, I mean, there's too many inconsistencies across the stories that people tell, and even in this frickin' interview of what people say that make no sense. It makes me think of Yeonmi Park, the North Korean defector, who has become a center of massive controversy because she lies about North Korea.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same concept. She has a financial incentive to lie and embellish about North Korea, just like former Scientologists do, because they want to sell their shit.
That's the chick that was like, oh, there's dead children, and then people would watch as the rats would come and like peck hack out the eyeballs.
Right. Right. She's been proven to be a liar, and it's not because these people want to support North Korea or
Joe
anything.
Rogan sucks it up.
Yeah, I mean, you can. It's the same concept. North Korea is the unknown for people, so the same concept applies. She is exaggerating or just straight up making shit up because she wants people to listen to her and buy her stuff. Just like former Scientologists have the incentive to do the same thing.
Also, North Korea is partially impoverished that bad because of U.S. sanctions, which are against international law.
Also, North Korea is not a communist country. It's look up JUCHE on the internet. People always point to North Korea as an example of a failed communist state. It is not a communist country. So we'll keep going from there.
You mentioned earlier that Scientology is on the decline. So what I'm wondering is, what do you think is the outlook for Scientology over the next few years to a decade? Is this something that we need to actively pay attention to, or is it going to die out on its own? Just let things play out. Where do you see things going?
Yeah, interestingly enough, a little bit of the both of what you just said there. It is dying out on its own. I do think it still deserves to have attention paid to it, and it deserves to have its the speed of its demise accelerated. I certainly enjoy contributing to the acceleration of that demise.
Again, exactly. I mean, if you're looking for a motive to try and destroy something purely for revenge, even though you yourself said that you never saw anything bad, you're going off of hearsay, is crazy. That is a crazy reason, even though you yourself previously talked about the good aspects for most Scientologists. That makes no sense.
Well, and I would also like to add that he said Scientology is dying. So is a lot of other religions, at least in America, which is where I live.
Right, and
which I think is a good thing.
It doesn't make any sense to me why you would, first of all, why you would feel the need to try and exacerbate the demise of something that you say is already on the decline, but to admit that you're purely motivated by revenge, even though you've said that there are good aspects to it, and even intimated that while you were in the Sea Org, there were periods where you felt it was fulfilling. You said you left the Sea Org because it was no longer fulfilling, which would intimate that there were times that you felt you were helping people. So,
well, then just the revenge part of it, that's not a good place to be in your brain.
And honestly, if you were to come out and say that your goal for Scientology was to try and get any bad actors removed from the organization in the church hierarchy, to try and remove those bad people so that good Scientologists could lead the church and do more good work for people, I would be 100% behind it. Not just Scientology, but every church, every organization, every company, every government.
Yep.
Remove the damn bad people. I 100% support that. But the fact that you want to destroy it entirely is fucking crazy. That's crazy to me. So we'll keep going from there. We're almost at the end of the interview.
Woo.
Now, practically speaking, I don't think Scientology ever ceases to exist unless you succeed in getting its tax exemption taken away. It already has its tax exemption taken away once before. The IRS determined that L. Ron Hubbard was personally enriching himself from Scientology, and it stripped Scientology of its tax exemption. In 1993, it won that tax exemption back after a years-long process of harassing thousands of IRS agents personally.
So we already talked about that with Operation Snow White a little bit. He is misleading you about the reason that Scientology lost its tax exemption status. I mean, that was the reason that the IRS gave about why it was taking Scientology's tax exempt status away. but the real reason was the pressure by the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, I was going to say the government gives a lot of reasons that don't make sense.
I mean, lobbying and government money from corporations and industries is nothing new. Scientology has been being targeted, and Dianetics has been being targeted by the pharmaceutical industry and the mental health fields for over 70 years at this point.
Well, and when did this exactly start? Because after World War II, a lot of money went to defense contractors.
Dianetics came out in 1950.
Okay, so that was after World War II.
Yeah, and like we had kind of talked about before, Dianetics came out at the height of the authority of the mental health providers during the periods of institutionalization, lobotomies, and electroshock therapy. They had so much power.
Ratchet.
Right. Right. I mean, that story didn't come out of nowhere. The exposés on what went on in those buildings, they tried to kill journalists. They tried to shut down media outlets. If you think they weren't gunning for L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, think again. It's nothing new. The IRS targeted Scientology to try and destroy it because they were being pushed to by government money that was coming from the pharmaceutical industry. He is right that that is the excuse that the IRS gave, but at that point, L. Ron Hubbard didn't even live in the United States anymore. He was in the UK, which never did the same thing, because they may have their own version of the lobbies, but it's nowhere to the extent of the United States.
I was going to say it didn't exempt Julian Assange.
Yeah, true. So, I just wanted to point that out, that he is technically correct, that that's the reason the IRS gave, but not explaining the motivation behind it is just, in my view, is a falsehood.
And my view, I guess.
So we'll keep going. Oh, and I also wanted to point out where he says that the Scientology personally harassed IRS agents. That's also technically not true. The IRS and the Justice Department and the FBI continually raided Scientology buildings. They stole materials, they stole e-meters, they stole Dianetics, they stole L. Ron Hubbard's unpublished works while harassing the church. And the Church of Scientology did not directly... This is where fair game starts to come into play. Like I said, Scientology only turned into what it is in that regard because it was constantly being harassed by the U.S. federal government.
Well, that makes... I mean, not to take it to Epstein, but where are all those, like... God, what are those things called? The things we move the fucking dryer and washer into. The dollies.
Oh, right.
There were dollies full, like boxes full of files.
Right. I mean,
that the government has that we have not been told about, or the black book.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, we've been told a few names.
Yeah, the names they want us to know, the people they want to destroy, just like L. Ron Hubbard.
Well, they're the fall guys.
I mean, it's just like Capone. They wanted to destroy him, so what did they use? They used the IRS. That's exactly what they did to L. Ron Hubbard. They tried to use the IRS to turn it into a weapon to try to destroy him because of all the money they were getting. And that's what it all boils down to in America. Believe what you want about Scientology. Believe believe what it teaches. Don't believe what it teaches. But use your brain on that. If the government is sicking the IRS after you to try and destroy you, it's not because they want to do it in the interest of the public. They want to destroy you because they're being given money, and the people behind that money want to destroy you.
Well, that's like Matt Taibbi when he was testifying in front of Congress, and then all of a sudden an IRS agent came to his house that day while he was in Congress testifying with a gun on his hip, which usually, I don't know if you know this, but in the United States of America, IRS agents do not usually have guns.
Right. There are so many examples of this. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to believe this. The United States has done this so many times. They even do it against environmental protesters.
Or, in international law.
Right.
Or domestic law. It doesn't matter.
So we'll keep going from here. We're almost to the end.
Scientology is probably the only organization in history that succeeded in bringing the IRS to its knees. It is my hope that sort of what we're doing here with SPTV and a whole bunch of other activists who are doing similar things who've never had anything to do with Scientology.
Right. These activists who have never had anything to do with Scientology, who are using what you force feed them as weapons against it because they don't know anything, hence the whole reason I started this thing in the first place.
That is interesting.
Right. So you're basically turning people into weapons against the church and only feeding them your own narrative and telling them that anything the church says in its own defense is a lie. You're doing exactly what I said. The church can't defend itself without resorting to these tactics that it uses that you then use as further evidence of their own craziness.
Also, don't trust a government that, at one point says, "Oh my God, it's a Chinese spy balloon," and then 8 months later, the Pentagon comes out and says, "Oh no, it was just a weather balloon." Look it fucking up. Do your own research. Come on.
Right. On everything. Try, like we say, as much as we can. Don't believe everything I'm telling you. That's why I'm putting these clips in here with what I'm saying. And don't just say, "Oh, I'm taking anything out of context." I'm telling you to go watch the full video. So, we'll keep going.
Even if Scientology keeps its tax-exempt status, its membership will continue to decline. But the problem with having this tax exemption is because it has a special type of religious tax exemption that protects it in the courts. Like if you sue Scientology and you try to get the judge to look at a particular policy letter in Scientology, the judge will go, whoa, that's religious scripture. I'm not even allowed to give an opinion on whether that's abusive or not.
Right. I mean, there's sure as shit a lot of stuff in other religions' scriptures that you would not want a court to determine if it's abusive or not, right? About what you can or can't do with your slaves, about what you can or can't do with your women.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right.
The Bible.
To be talking about this in Scientology as if it's Scientology's scapegoat out of this is so fucking disingenuous that it's one of the most ridiculous things in this entire interview.
I was going to say, good thing this isn't something we're putting on YouTube or isn't the first 15 seconds.
Right. So that is insane to me to talk about that in the context of Scientology as if it's an escape for Scientology. A judge can't pass a judgment on religious scripture not because of Scientology, but because it would destroy every major religion out there. So we'll keep going.
And also, because they're tax exempt, their operating expenses are as close to zero as you can get. They do not pay property tax, and they do not have they do not have a payroll. All of their staff members are considered volunteers. They don't have to pay any of them.
Again, to talk about that as if it's Scientology specific, they are volunteers. Most of them are. If you're in the Sea Org, you still draw some form of a wage. If you're on staff, you still draw some form of a wage. But just like in Christianity, where you take a vow of poverty and give up all your worldly possessions, that to portray that as if it's something only in Scientology, to put it in that light, is ridiculous. Nobody in Scientology forces you to sign up for this. You join it fully knowing, and yet people don't point to all of the ecclesiastical people who work in other religions, who draw no wage, who give up all their worldly possessions. I mean, take that what you will, but if you're going to judge Scientology on that, you're going to have to judge all the other religions that do the same thing.
Well, it makes me think of the LDS church and the scandal they had this past, year or 2 years?
Right.
Where they had over $1 billion in unclaimed revenue or whatever the fuck.
Right. The LDS has all this money in their rainy day fund, but if you're a Mormon and you're going on a mission, your family and your ward puts together the money for you to go on that mission.
Well, it's not even that. It's the tithings.
Right? That's true too.
Their statues on top of their temples are pure gold. not to give any, you know.
Right? When the statue of the angel Moroni fell off of the Great Salt Lake Temple after an earthquake, they were real quick to get down there and protect that statue, let me tell you right now. And it's not just the statues, the baptismal fonts are also made with pure gold.
Also,
But this is not just an attack piece on the LDS, but they are a good example of quote unquote not having a payroll. These people are volunteers. So
there's less than 30,000 members in the entire world. I mean, it's probably closer to 20,000 at this point.
people use that as something against the church all the time, but that doesn't even make any sense.
wait, so there's less than 20,000?
He's suggesting that there's between 20 and 30,000 Scientologists in the whole world.
Even I don't believe that.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. They use that as something against the church all the time to say that its membership is that low. I mean, the first video announcing the Scientology network has 53 million views on YouTube. Scientology's channel on YouTube alone has over 84,000 subscribers. The Scientology Network live feed on Twitter consistently has at least 35 to 40,000 people watching it at any point. Even if you were to say that that's the church propping up those viewers, you're already proving your own point wrong. And that's not even including the Scientologists who are watching it on the website, watching it on DirecTV, watching it on TV in general. The idea that there is between 20 and 30,000 Scientologists makes no sense whatsoever. So we're going to go to the very last clip here.
If you'd like to learn more about the growing grassroots protest movement against Scientology, I recently joined some of the protesters on Hollywood Boulevard to do some on-the-ground and behind-the-scenes reporting. The video is live over on my YouTube channel, 5149 with James Lee. Head on over, check that out. Give me a follow. The link will be in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching Breaking Points, and I appreciate your time today.
So I wanted to include his little outro there because I highly encourage you to go watch that video. Go watch these protesters and what they're doing. I understand that the goal of protest is to make people uncomfortable, but...
Which is also why Biden was late to the State of the Union address.
Yeah. So they're not just protesting or holding up picket signs. They're swatting churches. They're
swatting churches?
Yes. They're calling in fake fires, calling in fake bomb threats. They're swatting churches. So...
I remember people calling in bomb threats when I was in high school.
Yeah, so that's the kind of... And there are a lot of videos where there's just people walking by. These aren't people who have any positions of power in Scientology. They're just normal-ass people trying to go in there and do their course. And there are people using bullhorns to use the alarms and just holding them right up to people's ears and screaming in their ears all this dumb shit to try and affect a change that they themselves, as this person just talked about, would have no knowledge or influence over. If you're going to protest somebody, protest the people who can affect the change. There's no point in swatting churches and going out of your way to harm these people who are trying to do, like he said earlier, improve themselves, to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and get your life together and use these tools for only the nominal fee of $9.99.
Yeah, keep swatting to Twitch streamers.
Right. I mean, good God. These so-called grassroots protesters are the same people he just talked about who are activists who have had no prior knowledge or contact with the Church of Scientology. Well, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
I was going to say, a lot of roots movements have been created by the government, so beware of psyops.
Yeah, God, it's just... So that brings us to the end of this video and this interview breakdown. It was a bit longer than it normally is just because we had such a long video to break down and talk about. Again, I highly encourage you to watch the whole video so you can't say I'm taking anything out of context. Just look up Breaking Point Scientology on YouTube. Watch the whole thing. Go to this person's channel. Watch the videos of them. with these so-called protesters. Nothing that I've told you so far today, I can't show you in specific books, not and point to different policy letters. There are so many different things that we broke down today that, just like I said when we started here, I can't back up with hard evidence. So, like we always say, question everything. Question what I tell you, question what they tell you. You don't have to question his motives. He straight up told you what they were in this interview. So I can't understand a way that even if you don't believe in Scientology, that you could listen to this podcast and everything we've just discussed and not suddenly miraculously believe in Scientology. That's not the goal of this podcast in any way. But after what we've talked about, it should at least make you question a lot more shit about what you hear that is negative from former members of the church. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah, if you're still listening, then thank you. Send us emails, even if it's hate mail, because any press is good press. Reading is always a good thing. To your own research. Like he said, what the Science Channel always used to say, question everything. But, read books, all that good stuff, world peace, stuff like that.
Perfect. And if you do want to email us, it's just ScientologyChat, all one word, at gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We might not be back until next Thursday.
Las Vegas!
But thank you so much again for listening, and thank you for getting all the way through this. Have a good rest of your night.
Bye!